ever could. It was one of those gentle afternoons that only come late in life. Soft light spilling through the kitchen window, the kind that turns ordinary moments into something you'll remember. I was pouring chamomile tea, the amber liquid catching the sun like molten gold. Decades of stitching hems, baking pies, and cradling fragile teacups had taught my hands one thing. They never wavered. Until that day, Alexander, my grandson, said something that made the teapot slip perilously close to the edge of the table. Before we dive deeper, I'd love to know, where are you listening from right now? Maybe you're tucked into a cozy cottage nestled between rolling hills, or perched in a bustling metropolis where the skyline never sleeps. Wherever you are, thank you for being here. That day was quiet, the kind I cherish most. The garden was freshly trimmed. The jasmine by the porch spilled its sweet perfume through the open window. I'd expected Alexander for a brief visit. He'd be leaving soon for a cross-country journey. At 30, he carried himself with a calm assurance, the sort that makes a room feel like it's holding its breath whenever he speaks. I heard his boots crunch on the gravel path before I saw him. That sound alone always brought a smile to my face. He walked in without knocking, always had. Clutched in his hands was a paper bag from the bakery downtown. Warm cinnamon rolls filled the kitchen with their spicy perfume within seconds. "Thought we could have these with tea," he said, setting the bag on the counter. His voice was warm, familiar, but his eyes held something I couldn't name. We sat at the old walnut table, the one that's witnessed 3 generations. Tea poured smoothly. Cups warmed our palms. We chatted about work, the weather, family trifles, but his gaze kept drifting, searching for a moment to speak. "Grandma," he began abruptly, cutting through the comfortable silence. "You've always been the strongest person I know. But I've been keeping something from you. Something I should have said years ago." That's when my hand trembled, just slightly. The teapot clinked against his cup. I set it down, pretending to adjust my cushion, though my heart had already slowed to a heavy drumbeat. I studied his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the faint crease between his brows. I'd watched him grow from a wide-eyed boy into the man before me. And yet, in that instant, I wasn't sure which version of him I was seeing. "What is it, Alexander?" I asked, my voice steady even as something deep inside braced itself. He leaned forward, fingers interlaced on the table. "The moments I feel most like myself," he said quietly, "are when I'm here with you. Not just visiting, but here. Truly here." His words settled between us like fallen leaves, soft, delicate, impossible to ignore. The tick of the wall clock, the distant hum of a lawnmower, the robins singing in the oak tree outside. Every sound sharpened. I didn't fully understand yet, but there was a tenderness in his expression that pulled me in. A closeness that suddenly made this feel more than a casual stopover. I thought of all the years, shared dinners, late-night conversations when he was young. How often had I been his anchor without even knowing it? I smiled, though my mind raced. "You've always had a home here, Alexander." "You know that," he nodded but didn't look away. "It's more than that." Outside, the wind stirred the curtains. I reached for my tea, partly to mask my own uncertainty. My fingers weren't as steady as I wished. I couldn't tell if his words comforted or unsettled me. "Tell me." "Then," I said softly, and he did. His voice was low, deliberate. Each word measured, as if he were handling something fragile. He spoke of his life, the hollow feeling of being surrounded by people yet feeling utterly alone. The long, quiet mornings where his thoughts drifted back to this kitchen, to my listening ear, to the way I never made him feel small. Gratitude laced his tone, but also a weight that tightened my chest. As he spoke, memories wove into his confession. I saw him at 14, perched on this very table's edge, telling me about his first school fight. I remembered the letter he'd sent from university when he thought he couldn't finish the semester, how I'd pressed it to my heart like a lifeline, decades of evenings when he'd slump into that chair, just talking. It struck me then, perhaps for the first time, how deeply we'd shaped each other's lives. Not just as family, but as twin anchors. The light outside shifted, bathing his face in a softer glow. I watched his hesitation melt into raw honesty. And though I didn't yet grasp the full weight of what he'd reveal, I knew this. My trembling hands weren't from fear. Some truths shake the air around you before they're spoken. I leaned in slightly. My voice was barely a whisper. "Go on, Alexander." He told me he'd been waking before dawn for months, long before the first bus rumbled down Maple Street. He'd sit in his apartment, coffee growing cold, scrolling through work emails while a nameless tightness clenched his chest. "Everyone thinks I'm fine," he said, staring at his hands. "But I haven't felt like myself in a long time. Except when I'm here." Steam curled from our cups in thin white threads. I heard the robin in the oak, the rumble of a delivery truck 2 blocks away. Our kitchen had drifted into its own quiet pocket of time. I didn't fill the silence. I just watched him, the way his shoulders squared, then softened. The way his voice dropped as if afraid of startling something fragile inside himself that had just begun to trust. He'd visited the attic storage room where his mother kept old family boxes. "I was looking for my old baseball glove," he admitted, attempting a smile that didn't quite land. "Instead, I found Grandpa's letters, the ones he wrote you when he was working on the river project." He slid a worn envelope from his pocket, its flap delicately sealed with a sliver of tape. I read one. Then I read them all. For a moment, the kitchen vanished. I saw myself again, a young woman standing at a bus stop, the letter warm inside my coat on a winter's day. I remembered the ache of distance, and the miracle of paper, how a single page could carry a man's laughter or the way he saw the world, all the way home. I ran my fingertip along the envelope's edge. My throat tightened. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I shouldn't have opened them. Your family," I told him. "You opened a window, not a wound." My voice trembled just enough to betray me. He sat perfectly still, the way people do when something precious occupies the room. He took a breath and the words came in a steady stream, inevitable as rain on a tin roof. He spoke of his job, a treadmill of deadlines and victories that vanished by morning. His friends, good men with booming laughter and ever-ringing phones. He spoke of coming here on Sundays and feeling the ground beneath him again. The creak of these floors, the way I always left the back door unlatched, the scent of lemon polish and jasmine. "It's like your house reminds me I'm not a puzzle to solve," he said. "Just a person who needs roots." Then he took my hand. His palm was warm, firm, his grip careful. "I want to move in, Grandma. Not forever, but for a while. I want to help with the garden, fix the back porch steps, finally repair that old oak chest's hinge. I can pay rent. I can cook. You know I can. But more than that, I want to listen to you. I want to record your stories, every one you're willing to share, and turn them into a book for the whole family." He paused, glancing toward the window as if borrowing courage from the sky. "And I want to take your name, not instead of my father's, but with it. I want to carry you with me when I introduce myself. I want the world to know who taught me what steadiness truly means." The teacup clinked softly against its saucer when I set it down. That was the tremor, the sudden flutter in my hands that surprised even me. It wasn't fear. It was the shock of a love that had flowed beneath the surface, patient as a river beneath ice. Now breaking free, glinting in the sunlight, I'd expected a cinnamon roll, a bit of chatter, a quick goodbye at the door. Not this. Not the gravity of being chosen. "Alexander," I said, and his name felt heavier than ever, each syllable brimming with new meaning. "Are you certain?" "I've never been more sure of anything," he replied. "I'm tired of sprinting through every room of my life. I want to walk through it with you, to learn the names of what I'm feeling. You've always known them." I don't recall standing, but suddenly I was at the sink, staring out at the garden. The jasmine swayed in the breeze. The neighbor's dog chased shadows along the fence. On the porch rail hung the little brass wind chime Grandpa had hung the summer we couldn't afford a proper one. It had always sounded brave for such a small thing. Behind me, the kitchen chair scraped, and then he was beside me, tall and uncertain, a boy and a man folded into one. "If you say no," he murmured, "I'll understand. I'll still come Sundays. I'll still bring cinnamon rolls." I turned and placed my hand against his cheek, feeling the stubble, the warmth, every year between us. "I won't say no," I said. "But I will say this. Moving in doesn't mean you're rescuing me. We'll be companions. We'll help each other." He smiled then, a real smile, the kind that lives in the eyes. That's all I've ever wanted. We spent the rest of the afternoon as if we'd both been holding our breath for months and were finally allowed to exhale. He fetched the old photo albums from the parlor while I found a fresh notepad and the pen that writes like a gentle stream. We brewed tea, then coffee, then tea again. The light shifted from gold to a deep, comforting amber. We set up the tiny recorder he'd brought, the kind that looks too small to hold real memory, and he asked where I wished to begin. I told him about this house before it was ours, how I'd stood on the front path with Grandpa, imagining curtains at the windows and a rug to silence the hallway's echo. I told him about the night the pipes burst and how we'd laughed while mopping the floors, choosing laughter because it warmed us more than anger. I told him about winters layered with competing scents, wood smoke, citrus peel, wool drying on the radiator, and summers, when we'd eat peaches over the sink because they were too juicy to trust on a plate. He listened the way only someone you raised knows how to listen, with the patience of someone waiting for dough to rise. When his questions slowed, he brought out the box from the attic. We opened it together. The letters were there, bound with twine, paper softened at the edges. I chose the first one. It bore a coffee stain near the greeting. I remembered that stain perfectly. My hands didn't tremble this time. They were steadier than they'd been all day. We read until the words blurred, not from age, but from tears smoothing the ink. He turned off the recorder, and we sat in silence. Outside, the sky deepened into that forgiving blue that comes just before the first star appears. Grandpa was funny, Alexander said, half laughing, half sniffling. He saved his best jokes for the page, I replied. I used to press the letters to my face just to hold on to his voice a little longer. Alexander leaned back, gazing around the kitchen as if seeing it anew, or as if it had finally whispered its secret. I keep thinking about what it means to carry on, he said. Not just a family name, but a way of being. I want to do that. I want to build something steady. You will, I said. But steadiness doesn't always mean standing still. Sometimes it's knowing where your center is, so you can walk away and always find your way back. He nodded, then said the last thing I expected, the moment that sealed the afternoon into memory as firmly as plaster. I got an offer, he said. A big one. The kind people dream about, new city. More money than I've ever made. I was going to say yes, because that's what you do when the world dangles a shiny thing. But then I realized I'd be saying no to something truer. I want to stay. I want a smaller life that fits me better. I want to fix what can be fixed, forgive what can't, and listen to the stories of the person who taught me the difference. I laughed, a sound too big for the kitchen. You're not choosing small, I said. You're choosing close. There's a difference. We made a list. It was his idea, but I wrote it down. The pen scratched in the quiet. On one side, the practicals. Move-in date, clear the guest bedroom. Call the handyman about the porch steps, if we can't manage it ourselves. Replace the felt pads under the chair legs. On the other side, tasks no app could ever hold. Record one memory. Each morning for 10 days, bake Grandma's almond cake and eat it on the porch with the wind chime. Sort the seed, packets for autumn, and decide together what to plant when winter comes. When he left that night, dusk had settled and crickets sang. He stood on the porch, studying the roofline as if memorizing it. I'll bring my things next weekend, he said, and I'll make breakfast. Not the instant kind, the real one. With the blue bowl. You always loved that blue bowl, I said. It makes everything taste like childhood, he replied. Then he hugged me. Not the quick, polite hug of a busy man at the door, but the long, unhurried kind where two heartbeats take their time to find the same rhythm. When he stepped back, he touched the brass wind chime with one finger. It chimed, brave as ever. A small sound, holding a big promise. I watched him walk down the path, past the jasmine, past the spot where the snowman lasted longest each winter, because it was always a touch colder there. At the gate, he turned and gave me a little salute, 2 fingers to his brow, just like his grandfather used to do. Then he vanished into the soft twilight and the last bus of the evening. I washed the teacups by hand, even though the dishwasher sat open and ready. Some things deserve the slow method. Warm water ran over my fingers. When I set the cups upside down on the towel, the kitchen looked the same as always, and yet utterly transformed. The chair where he'd sat still felt occupied. The notepad lay open, our list catching the lamplight. The recorder sat there, a small, patient creature, brimming with our voices. I touched it the way you might touch a friend's shoulder as you pass by. A quiet, grateful brush. In bed, I couldn't sleep. But I wasn't restless. I lay there, hands folded over my chest like a personal prayer. I thought of how life surprises you, sometimes with thunder, sometimes with the softest confession. I'd prepared myself for the ache of goodbyes. Instead, I was given an arrival. I was given a name that would stretch to hold two families, two histories braided without breaking. I was given the chance, at 77, to begin again. Not by pretending to be young, but by beginning again as myself. Morning came with the gentle cruelty of birds announcing that time always moves forward. I made oatmeal in the blue bowl because he'd planted the idea in my head and opened the back door to welcome the day. The garden looked the same, but I could already picture the changes we'd make together. The porch steps, squared and safe. The fence repaired. The corner by the hydrangea turned into a reading nook for warm evenings. I imagined a black marker on a calendar filling with tiny, meaningful appointments. Story about the bus stop. Ask about my first winter here. Teach Alexander the pie crust trick. Show him the scar on the kitchen table, and tell him how it got there. When I sat down to eat, I turned on the recorder and spoke into the quiet kitchen. Good morning. This is Eleanor. The house smells like cinnamon and soap. The light is soft and the birds are busy. If this is the first page of something, let it be honest. Let it be ordinary. Let it be full. Let it be ours. I clicked it off, laughed to myself, then looked at my hands. The faint tremor that comes and goes like an old friend. Yesterday, they shook with the fear of breaking. Today, they shook with the weight of being held. These are different kinds of trembling. And if you've lived long enough, you learn to tell them apart. Later, the phone rang. It was Alexander, already on his way to the hardware store. He wanted to know, do you prefer brass or brushed nickel for the new hinge on the oak chest? Brass, I said. It ages with dignity, he replied. Like someone I know. Even through the line, I could hear his smile. After we hung up, I opened the cupboard and took down the brass wind chime. It had always lived outside, but I wanted it in the kitchen now, right by the window. I set it on the sill. The sun kissed the metal, warming it to the eye. I thought about how the tiniest sound can call someone to the table, to the door, to the moment. I thought about how, at the end of all our busy years, what we crave most is usually simple: a place to sit, a hand that stays, a story that tells the truth. That afternoon, I started clearing the guest bedroom. I folded quilts, sorted books, and made a small pile for the charity sale. In the closet, on the highest shelf, I found a forgotten shoebox. Inside were theater tickets, 3 faded Polaroids, and a note in Grandpa's handwriting. Save this for a rainy day. I set the box on the bed and felt a tear trace into my smile. It would rain. It always does. But now I knew what we'd do when it did. We'd sit by the window with the brass chime, catching the dull light. We'd read letters. We'd write new ones. We'd cook something. That took all afternoon, not because it needed to, but because we did. We'd fix what could be fixed. We'd forgive what couldn't, and we'd practice the quiet, steadfast art of staying. I was pouring tea when the sun slipped behind the old oak tree, and the first chill of evening brushed the kitchen floor. I watched my hands, those old, trusted hands, and saw them settle. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. Somewhere a child laughed. Somewhere, a young man chose brass over brushed nickel. If you're listening from a city I've never seen, or from a porch like mine, I know this. Sometimes the words that make your hands tremble aren't the ones that end something. They're the ones that begin it. Yesterday, my grandson told me he wanted to come home and carry my name forward with his. Today, I'm making room. There's a wind chime on the windowsill, waiting for dinner to be ready. There's a blue bowl drying on the rack. There's a list with more life on it than I've had in years. And there's me, an old woman who's just learned again. Love isn't a loud rescue, it's the quiet rearranging of furniture. So 2 people can sit closer without bumping their knees.